Good evening from Holyrood. On tonight's Representing Border.
Presiding Officer, I gratefully accept the opportunity to serve as First Minister.
John Swinney wins one of the least competitive votes in Holyrood history. But the man at the head of Scotland's political table already faces plenty of demands.
There's a 3% year-on-year budget cut planned for the NHS, and that's just not feasible for delivering successful services.
Also on the programme, where did it all go wrong for Scottish Labour? We asked the party's former leader, Kezia Dugdale. It was probably the least competitive vote we'll have in this five-year Parliament. John Swinney was today confirmed as First Minister by MSPs following the SNP's Holyrood election victory. Now, almost 2 weeks after people went to the polls, we almost have a new government with the cabinet expected to be announced tomorrow. The defeated opposition leaders put their names forward in today's vote and made speeches pushing their own merits. But even they knew it was a forlorn hope, as Matty Sutton reports.
John Swinney headed into the chamber confident he would be continuing as First Minister. This afternoon, that was rubber stamped.
As John Swinney has secured more than half of all the votes cast, I declare that he is now the First Minister of Scotland, and I'd like to congratulate him.
As the leader of the biggest party in the Parliament, Mr Swinney told MSPs he had a mandate to form the next government.
Presiding Officer, I gratefully accept the opportunity to serve as First Minister. It is the greatest privilege of my life, and I promise to work every day to repay the trust that the people of Scotland have placed in me.
During his speech, he also promised to press ahead with his plan to pursue a second independence referendum.
And I will ensure that the people have the right to decide on their own future. That is the agenda I offer the people of Scotland.
All the other 5 party leaders also put themselves forward to be First Minister.
As much as I respect John Swinney, he has only known regression in his time as party leader of the SNP. He has only gone backwards in his efforts and experienced electoral decline.
Thankfully, John Swinney didn't get the majority he said was in the bag, and my party played its part in stopping him. The blue wall stayed blue as we won a hat-trick of seats across the south of Scotland.
We acknowledge that the SNP won this election and should have the right to form a government, and we will work on issues with them to make Scotland a fairer, greener and independent country. But we'll also hold that government to account.
Scotland deserves a First Minister who wishes to build opportunity and prosperity for every Scot, and the only party in this chamber with that agenda is Reform UK.
Our duty, every single one of us, is to come to this Parliament to act and to serve and to deliver for the great people of Scotland. And let's get straight to work.
Mr Swinney promised to work with other parties.
And now, Presiding Officer, I offer to work across party lines to deliver our agenda. By electing a Parliament of minorities, the people have given us a specific instruction to work together. Voters value cooperation among their politicians. They want to see more of it. And in this Parliament, I will work to see more of it too.
In Kelso, shoppers shared their views on Mr Swinney.
I'm not too keen on it, to be honest.
No, he's rotten.
Why is that?
He does nothing. Talks and does nothing.
He's all right. He's right to the point. Doesn't belt on him with his nonsense.
He's all for Scotland.
Tomorrow, the SNP leader will be officially sworn in at the Court of Session. Then he'll choose which of his MSPs will join him at the Cabinet table.
Matty Sutton. Now, one of the big issues that will be sitting near the top of John Swinney's entry is Scotland's NHS. New data today showed that around 1/3 of people are still waiting for more than 4 hours for treatment in accident and emergency units. Earlier, I brought together Dr Chris Provan of the Royal College of GPs and Emma Phillips from the trade union Unison to see if they had any solutions. Chris Provan, what do you think are the biggest issues facing the Scottish Health Service just now?
From my point of view and from patients' point of view, it's about being able to see your general practitioner. So we need a bigger proportion of the budget invested in general practice. so that we have more GPs to help people. And a shift of the balance of investment into general practice to help the whole system. And this is a problem that all countries are really struggling with, and countries like Denmark are trying to invest more in general practice and primary care, and we need to go in that direction. The First Minister previously said that he'd listened to us, and we welcome the recent investment around GP workforce, but we need to continue that going forward.
Emma Phillips, that's the GP's point of view. From Unison's point of view, do you agree? Is it that frontline healthcare?
I think it's really important, the overall funding package for the NHS. There's a 3% year-on-year budget cut planned for the NHS, and that's just not feasible for delivering successful services. We've got the longest waiting list since devolution has occurred, and something needs to be tackled. One of the most important ways of doing that is to fund health and social care properly. We have some of the hardest working, lowest paid people working in health and social care, and there's not enough of them. There's not enough care packages available. It's not funded properly, and that's causing bed blocking in the NHS. And if you sort out health and social care, that will help to resolve some of the problems in the NHS.
You talked about more money there. We know this is going to be a pretty tight Parliament for cash. We've heard a lot about spending gaps that could emerge over the next 5 years. Is the answer to always throw more money at the NHS, or are there kind of changes to the way things are shaped, including, like you talked about, social care there, investing more in social care to maybe not all go to the health service?
Well, I think it's really important to invest in the services and to make sure that it's delivered by people for people. One of the issues that we have in the NHS, and in particular in health and social care, is the services are delivered by the private sector for profit. And I would like to see more of that money going back into services being delivered for people.
Chris Provan, essentially the same question to you. You wanted more money for GPs, but that's what everyone says, is it not?
I mean, healthcare costs are going up across the world because of an ageing population, and we need more GPs per patient. It's about where we get the best cost effectiveness. I would agree that we need investment in social care and joined up social care and GP services, so we hold more people in the community, and we have to spend less on expensive hospital admissions, avoiding unnecessary admissions going forward, because if you invest at that point in the longer term, you save money. And it's always been the policy of government to invest more in the community, but now it's time to deliver on that. And health services across the whole system are thinking we need to change direction, and there needs to be a political consensus about how we do that.
Do you think then that investing more in GP services would take people away from, for example, accident and emergency? We see again figures showing the government's miles off its supposedly legally binding target. And will the Scottish Government's big idea of GP walk-in centres help with this?
We're not in favour of walk-in centres because they've been shown in other areas of the world. The research confirms that they're not a cost-effective way of delivering a service. They tend to actually attract people who are the least needy to some extent, whereas people in deprived communities, the older complex patients, rural communities, we need more funding in those areas where we match the medical and social need rather than walk-in centres.
Yeah, and would that involve changes to how GP practices work? We hear a lot about the ATM rush. Do you need to change how you operate if you are to get more money?
It's about capacity. If you have more GPs, then you'll be able to have more capacity. GPs already work very hard at their appointment systems and working in partnerships to actually deliver those services. General practice is the most fiscally responsible part of the system, and if we moved more towards having a GP per 1,000 patients, increasing the percentage of the budget from less than 7% back to 11%, that would help. And we only have the same number of GPs since 2013, so we haven't grown that workforce that much. So we need more people on the ground to provide those services. That's why patients are able to get appointments, more GPs.
On a similar theme, we touched upon social care earlier on. Could that help prevent people having to turn up at places like A&E?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely we need to invest in primary care like GP services, like addiction services, and try and prevent people ending up in hospital in the first place. But when people are in hospital, there's real problems. We're 3,000 nurses short of what we should be. There's legislation about safe staffing levels, and regularly the safe staffing levels are not met, which means that staff are under stress and pressure. And if you want to attract staff into working for the NHS or into working for health and social care, it's got to be funded. People have got to be have decent working conditions and be funded properly for it. They really care about the work they deliver, and they really care, and it's really important that to allow them to deliver it, it's invested in.
And as part of that, should we be looking again at, a national care service that was obviously ditched in the last Parliament after a few years spent looking at it? Should it be back on the agenda?
Well, I think care needs to be looked at on a wider basis. It's really important that we have a proper discussion and debate about how social care should be delivered. National Care Service is one option, but the way it was planned before was not appropriate, and we would very much like to discuss with the Scottish Government about appropriate ways of delivering a care service on a national basis.
So does that look like a wee bit more, sounds like maybe doesn't quite hang together, but a bit more local control even in a national service? Is that one of the big sticking points?
I think there's a mix of local control and an overall umbrella from a national service, and the balance wasn't right in the previous proposals. It is really important to have local control over the services, but actually you need minimum standards. At the moment in health and social care, it's a race to the bottom in terms of what they can do, how they can do it as cheaply as possible, instead of thinking about the people and the support that they need.
Chris, Emma mentioned there about attracting people to the health service and the social care sector. One of the issues that you see in the south of Scotland and indeed in rural parts of Scotland is just attracting people to come work in rural Scotland. How do you solve that problem?
I mean, rural areas are a fantastic place to work and be part of a community, contribute to that. We have fabulous countryside to explore. Some of the barriers are simple. It's around accommodation availability and finding work for your spouse and all of those types of practical things. We talk about recruitment, retention, investing in these areas, keeping the GPs we already have by supporting them, having special training schemes in those areas and fellowships for just qualified GPs. There's many things that we can do to attract GPs to these areas. And with the 500 million investment over 3 years, we have significant funding to be able to attract GPs from other areas of the UK, hopefully, to work in these really great areas to work. And we also need to sell general practice to younger doctors, general practitioners, and working in these areas.
And just fairly briefly, if you wouldn't mind, Emma, same to you, how do you attract people into the NHS, particularly in rural parts of Scotland?
I think the support is needed for them in terms of the ability to live, because there's added expense in terms of travel and food and all of these issues. Living rurally has definitely got its benefits, but you need to invest in the staff. At the moment, there's plans to centralise lots of the services that go on in the public sector, in the NHS in particular, and we would like to see people with job security in rural areas and being invested in.
Okay, well, we'll see how much of this the government takes on board, but for now, Emma Phillips, Chris Provan, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Now, the Conservatives have forced a vote at Westminster calling for the UK government to approve new oil and gas fields in the North Sea. It comes after Labour ministers recommitted to their manifesto pledge to oppose issuing new licences. The Tories argue that giving the green light to the Jackdaw and Rosebank sites would create jobs and improve energy security. But they were criticised by UK Minister Ed Miliband for changing their position, having introduced a windfall tax on energy profits. There's plenty of politics at play here too, with by-elections on the horizon in the oil capital of Aberdeen South, as well as the Arbroath and Broughty Ferry constituency.
He's shutting down British oil and gas to show climate leadership.
Yep.
He put that in the King's speech.
Yeah.
Let's be crystal clear, though. What he's saying is that he's willing to turn his back on British industry, even though we won't need any less. We'll just rely on higher emission imports from abroad. Yep. Because he cares more about the climate bureaucrats than the jobs of British workers. That is what climate leadership means to him. But the question I would ask is, where exactly is this meant to be leading us to? Bankruptcy? Where does it end? Cheering as the lights go out, as the last factory in Britain closes. That's what his North Sea and carbon tax policies are doing. Yep. They are simply offshoring British emissions.
Families and businesses across the country deeply concerned about the impact of the Iran war on the cost of living. A war this country did not start, a war this government chose not to join, but which is having significant effects here at home. Just like when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022 and energy bills rocketed and the British people and firms paid the price. And the argument, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the heart of this gracious speech is there is one overriding lesson of these two crises, that while we remain exposed to the fossil fuel roller coaster, we are deeply vulnerable as a country. And there is an answer, and this is different from what it was like in the 1970s, when we had fossil fuel shocks. There is an answer staring us in the face. Energy independence through clean homegrown power we control.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer kept his job as Prime Minister despite frenzied speculation last week and the emergence of Wes Streeting and Andy Burnham as potential challengers to his leadership. But his position remains precarious, to say the least. And Labour Scottish leaders also under pressure. And as Sarwar this month led the party to its worst Holyrood election result since devolution. Kezia Dugdale knows all about the difficulties of that role, having led Scottish Labour from 2015 to 2017. But where does she think the blame lies for her former party's election result? I caught up with her earlier. Why did Scottish Labour do so badly at the Holyrood election?
I think there are three key reasons why Labour finds itself in the position of having had its worst result in devolution history. The first one was an attempt to frame the election as only about issues which were devolved to the Scottish Parliament, so focused on the SNP's record. The Labour Party don't get to determine what the election's about, that's for the people of Scotland to decide, and I think that was their first huge strategic error. The second one was not to talk up all of the good things that the UK Labour government had done. Because of that first strategic error, that meant they couldn't talk about all the additional money that was coming to Scotland through Barnett consequentials because the English Labour government were spending on NHS or on education. It also meant they couldn't talk about things like new apprenticeships and investment in defence that were going to bring jobs to Scotland. And I think the third major error was having absolutely zero list strategy. There's no way the party could have won or delivered on Nass Arbor as First Minister without working both of those ballot papers, asking people for votes on both the lavender and peach ballot paper, as every other political party was doing.
And do you think that the Scottish Labour Party got a bit overconfident after the general election result? Was a thumping victory from north and south of the border a couple of years ago, but also last year's Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse by-election where they won against the odds, and you know that was always the reasoning why they thought they could do it again.
So I obviously still know and like an awful lot of people that work behind the scenes for the Labour Party in Scotland, and every conversation I had with them, they were absolutely adamant that they were on track to win. And you would ask them why they were so sure, and yes, they would point to the 2024 result, yes, they would point to Hamilton, and then they would also point to their own internal polling numbers. And that was to be believed for a long time because the party was awash with cash, and Ask did an amazing job of bringing money into the party to do that type of detailed work. But the reality was that data was wrong. And when the Labour Party were saying every poll in the country was wrong, the reality was it was what they had in their own systems that was wildly out of step.
Just briefly, you mentioned cash. So how much difference does it make to have a lot of cash when you're heading into an election campaign? I know it sounds like a daft question, but you know, does that actually help you much when it comes to winning over voters?
So the biggest thing that cash gives you in campaigns is the opportunity to do internal research, to run focus groups on the types of policies that you might want to float, or to look at really detailed polling in different parts of the country about the state of the race and what you need to do to edge ahead. I didn't have money to do things like that to any great extent in 2016, but we know that Anas's Labour Party did because of the extent of donations that were reported in the last quarter of last year and into this year. The spending limit was £1.5 million for political parties in this election. I wouldn't be surprised if Labour got very close to that.
Do you think they got bang for the buck?
I think when you look at the amount of money that they spent versus the number of MSPs that they got, the ratio is very poor indeed.
With all that in mind, everything we've talked about there, does Anas Sarwar ultimately have to take responsibility for this? Should he still be in post as Scottish Labour leader?
So Anas Sarwar is taking responsibility, and I think in the fast world of politics in the 21st century, we assume that means every time you do something wrong, you have to resign. I don't think he needs to resign. I think he can take responsibility. I think he can acknowledge what went wrong and stay in post for as long as he wants to. In part because it doesn't look like MD's really clamouring for the job.
But can he remain credible doing that?
I think he's got a very strong case to make for why he's best placed to lead the party into next year's local government elections.
What about Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister? He's where all the blame has been pushed from the Scottish Labour leadership. Does he have to go?
I think he does, and I don't take any joy in that because I consider him a thoroughly decent man and a brilliant public servant.
What's the difference between him and Anas Sarwar?
The difference is that Keir Starmer's personal poll ratings are absolutely through the floor, and they have been for at least 6 months. They're irrecoverable from that. The public has made its mind up about Keir Starmer and his ability to be Prime Minister. It doesn't feel the same way about the Labour Party, which is why if you had a better Prime Minister with better communication skills, the party might have a chance in 2029. There's no great dislike for Anas Sarwar amongst the Scottish public. He just lost a battle between himself and John Swinney on who was best placed to lead Scotland as First Minister.
Who do you think should replace Keir Starmer if he stands down?
I think it's too early to determine that. We haven't seen the platforms from each candidate yet. I am really drawn to Andy Burnham though, because I think Andy Burnham is serious about rewiring Britain. He understands what a federal country could look like. He's interested in revisiting devolution and making sure the right powers sit in the right parliaments and local authority areas. I think that's critical to making the type of change I want to see for our country.
And obviously Anas Sarwar called for Sir Keir Starmer to resign a few months ago, a little bit clear of the election there. You obviously, as Scottish Labour, worked with a UK leader that, it's fair to say, I think you didn't love working with. How difficult can that relationship be, and what difference does that make when you're trying to do your own thing as the leader of the Scottish Labour Party?
So I did enjoy a good relationship with Jeremy Corbyn for a long period of time. The people around him were a different story, and regularly they would come to Scotland and put their foot through the bucket, for want of a better expression, when they were talking about devolution and talking about the history of this place. That created endless problems. I think what Anas Sarwar did was right, because what it meant was, when he was out in the campaign trail trying to lead with his message, he had a fighting chance of getting that across. Had he not distanced himself from Keir Starmer, every single question that Anas Sarwar would have faced would have been about the Prime Minister.
Well, we'll see how much longer Keir Starmer and indeed Anas Sarwar stay in their post for, but for now, Kezia Dugdale, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's all from us tonight. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow, and I hope you can join us then. But for now, thanks for watching, and good night.